The low hum of conversation filled the conference room as I sat at the edge of the table, casually glancing at my phone. The screen lit up. Tyler. I figured it'd be a check-in, a quick, "How's the trip?" or "When do you land?" Nothing too deep. So I stepped out into the hallway, expecting the usual back and forth. But the second I answered, his voice hit me like a slap. "I'm divorcing you," he said. Cold, smug, like he was delivering good news. I froze. "What?" "I've already sold the apartment," he went on, almost like he was proud of it. "So, you'll have to figure out where you're gonna live. Good luck with that." For a beat, I couldn't breathe. The sheer audacity. No hesitation, no remorse, just arrogance. I tightened my grip around the phone, trying to steady my voice. "You sold the apartment?" "Yeah," he said with this dry, condescending laugh. "Nicole and I need the money to get started. She deserves better than that shoebox anyway." Nicole. The name hit me like a slap. I'd suspected for a while. Tyler's late nights, the shady work trips, the emotional distance. But hearing her name, hearing him say it like I was the intruder, flipped a switch in me. "Sounds great," I replied, keeping my tone calm. No way was I giving him the satisfaction of hearing me break. "Let me back up. I'm Amelia. And until that phone call, I genuinely believed I'd married someone I could trust. Tyler and I had been together 6 years. Sure, not everything was perfect, but I thought we were a team. We had worked our asses off for that apartment, a cozy 2-bedroom in the city that I fell in love with the second I stepped through the door. It wasn't just property, it was ours, a milestone, a piece of the life we were building together. Or so I thought. Looking back, there were signs, subtle cracks I'd chosen to ignore. His dismissiveness when I asked about our finances, the way he'd kiss me on the forehead and wave off my questions with that charming smile. I used to think it was confidence. Now I know it was control. But Tyler made one mistake. He underestimated me. See, a few months ago, we refinanced the apartment. Tyler didn't really pay attention. He rarely did with paperwork. I had the deed transferred into my name only. He signed off on it without blinking because it meant a lower interest rate. He never read the fine print, never even asked. And that was going to be his downfall. After his call, I somehow made it through the rest of my meetings. I smiled, nodded, made polite conversation while my mind raced with everything he'd just thrown at me. He thought he'd blindsided me, thought he'd sold my home out from under me and skipped off into the sunset with his new girlfriend. But what he didn't realize was he'd sold something that didn't belong to him. That night, back in my hotel room, the fog of shock started to lift. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. If Tyler wanted to fight, fine. But he was going to learn that I don't lose easily. My first call was to Chloe, my lawyer, and also one of my oldest friends. I walked her through the situation, laying out every detail with a level voice, even as my heart pounded. "He sold the apartment," she repeated, dumbfounded. "Does he even realize he can't do that?" "Apparently not," I said, feeling a grim sort of amusement. "He thinks he already spent the money. Him and Nicole are planning their new little love nest." Chloe gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "Well, they're in for a rude awakening. That sale's invalid. You can prove sole ownership. If he took money from a buyer? That's fraud." That word sent a wave of satisfaction through me. "What's our next move?" I asked. "First, we notify the buyer that the sale isn't legal," Chloe said, already shifting into lawyer mode. "Then I'll send Tyler a formal letter outlining the consequences. If he pushes this any further, we take him to court." When I hung up, I felt a weird sense of peace settle over me. He thought he'd outsmarted me, left me scrambling. But instead, he just handed me the ammunition I needed to blow up his entire scheme. The rest of the trip, I stayed focused, pushed my emotions into a box and buried them deep. I'd deal with them later. For now, I had a goal: protect what was mine, reclaim control. By the time my flight landed, I was ready. "Hey," I said into the phone as I wheeled my suitcase off the baggage carousel. "I'm back. What's our next step?" "We already contacted the buyer," Chloe said. "They were surprised, to say the least, but they're cooperating, which helps." "And Tyler?" "I sent him the formal letter this morning. It lays out the illegality of the sale, confirms your sole ownership, and warns him about the consequences of fraud. No response yet, but if I had to guess, he's losing his mind." Good. When I walked into the apartment later that day, it felt different. His jackets were still draped over the chair. His sneakers were still dumped by the front door. But it wasn't his space anymore. The energy had shifted. It was mine. That evening, he burst in like a storm, red-faced, phone in hand. "What the hell is this?" he yelled, waving Chloe's letter in the air. "You're saying I can't sell the apartment? It's half mine." "No," I said calmly. "It's not. The deed's in my name. Has been for months." He blinked. "What are you talking about?" I walked over to the drawer where I'd already pulled the file, held up the deed. "After we refinanced, remember? You signed off on the transfer, or maybe you skimmed it, like you always do." His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to rage. "You think this changes anything? I already made a deal. You're going to look like a fool when it all falls apart." "No, Tyler," I said, meeting his gaze. "The deal's already off. The buyer knows it's not valid. And if you spend any of that deposit, you're in even deeper trouble." He scoffed. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but I do." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You've been treating me like I'm clueless for years, but I've been paying attention, and now you're going to pay for underestimating me." His jaw clenched. His eyes darted around the room. He knew. He knew he'd lost. He started pacing, like he always did when things slipped out of his control. "This is insane," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "You're blowing everything way out of proportion." I crossed my arms, staying planted where I was. "Actually, I'm being incredibly reasonable. You tried to sell an apartment you don't own. Legally, I could have you arrested. Instead, I'm giving you time to figure out where to go next. Consider it a courtesy." His eyes narrowed. "You think you can just kick me out?" "I don't think. I know. This is my apartment, Tyler. You signed it over without even realizing it. You don't live here anymore. You're a guest, and that's only if I let you stay." Over the next few days, his rage turned into desperation. He called me constantly, leaving voicemails that ping-ponged between fake apologies and thinly veiled threats. Meanwhile, Chloe got to work. She made sure the buyer rescinded the sale and drafted the first round of divorce paperwork. Every legal I dotted, every T crossed. "You're in a strong position, Amelia," she told me one morning over coffee. "He has no leverage, no claim to the apartment, and if he pushed that sale too far, he's flirting with actual criminal charges." It felt like I could breathe again. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to walk on eggshells or keep the peace. I wasn't pretending everything was fine while my life crumbled behind the scenes. I was taking control, and it felt incredible. One evening, my best friend Laura came over to help me box up Tyler's stuff, his gaming gear, his god-awful sports memorabilia, the shirts he never folded, the cologne I'd come to associate with empty promises. We piled it all neatly into boxes and stacked them by the door. "How's he taking it?" she asked, holding up one of his hideous paisley ties and making a face. I smirked, like a toddler throwing a tantrum. He still thinks he can talk his way out of this. Laura rolled her eyes and tossed the tie into the box. "Please, that man couldn't negotiate his way out of a paper bag. He doesn't deserve a single square foot of this place, or your time." I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. For so long I'd felt alone in my marriage, carrying the weight of it all while Tyler took credit for the parts that looked shiny on the outside. But now, I had people in my corner, people who saw me, and that made all the difference. Then came the final test. The moment Tyler walked through the front door with Nicole on his arm. I was sitting at the dining table reviewing some notes for work when I heard the lock turn. I looked up, and there she was, wearing heels way too high for apartment stairs, hair curled into perfect waves, and a smug little smile on her face, like she was walking into her new kingdom. She scanned the room. "So this is where we're staying," she said, her voice syrupy and sharp all at once. I stood up, heart racing, but my expression calm. "No," I said clearly. "Tyler was staying here. You? You're not staying here at all." Nicole blinked. "Excuse me?" "This isn't a crash pad for cheaters," I replied. "This is my home. You're not welcome here." She turned to Tyler, clearly expecting him to fix it, but he just stood there, deer in headlights. "What is this?" he barked, trying to take control. "You can't just—" I cut him off. "What this is my apartment. Not yours, not hers, mine. You tried to sell it behind my back and failed. Now you think you can just move your side chick in here? Not happening." Nicole's fake smile started to melt off her face. "Wait, what do you mean, your apartment? Tyler said he sold it, that he owned it." I raised an eyebrow. "Did he also tell you he committed fraud in the process? Because that's what you're standing in the middle of right now." She stepped away from him. "Fraud? Are you serious?" "Dead serious," I said. "He tried to sell property that wasn't his, signed documents under false pretenses. The sale's been voided. He's on thin ice legally, and you're trespassing." Nicole turned to Tyler, her tone sharp. "You told me this place was yours. You said you handled it." He raised his hands, stammering, "It's complicated. I was handling it. She shook her head. "No, I'm not getting dragged into this mess. You lied to me. You lied about everything." "Nicole." "No," I snapped. "Let me explain. Tyler made a deal behind my back. Thought he could run off with the money and start a new life with you. He didn't realize that I owned the apartment. So not only did he fail, he almost got himself charged. That's who you're with." She stared at him like she didn't recognize the man beside her. Then, without another word, she spun on her heel and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Tyler looked gutted. And honestly, I felt nothing. I turned back to him, keeping my voice steady. "Looks like you're on your own." He slumped down on the couch, burying his face in his hands. "Amelia, please, I messed up, I know, but you don't have to do this." "You're right," I said, walking into the kitchen and grabbing a folder from the counter. I set it down in front of him. "I don't have to, but I'm going to. That's the divorce paperwork. My lawyer's already drafted everything. Sign it." He stared at it, his face pale. "You really hate me that much?" I let out a low laugh. "No, Tyler, I don't hate you. I pity you. You had everything. Someone who loved you, a home, a life, and you blew it because you couldn't see past your own ego." I stepped toward the door and held it open. "I want you out by the end of the day. Take your boxes. Take your lies. But this is the last time I show you any kindness." He opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. Shoulders slumped, defeated. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll go." "Good," I said. "And don't try anything else. Chloe's handling the rest. If you cross another line, the next stop is court." He grabbed his coat and walked out without looking back. I stood there for a moment after the door shut, listening to the silence. It was finally mine. The silence that followed was deafening, but in the best way possible. For the first time in years, the apartment didn't feel heavy. No more passive-aggressive remarks lingering in the air. No more tension hiding behind closed doors. Just me, the hum of the city outside my window, and the quiet relief of being alone in my own space. Tyler's presence was gone, and with it, the constant pressure I hadn't even realized I was under. That evening, Lauren came back over with takeout and a bottle of wine. She dropped onto the couch with a dramatic sigh, kicking off her heels. "So, is he actually gone?" she asked, already reaching for the chopsticks. "Gone and not coming back," I said, handing her a glass of wine. "He packed up his stuff, didn't argue, just left." She raised her glass. "To fresh starts and well-earned victories." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled without forcing it, to never letting anyone bulldoze me again. Over the next few days, I poured my energy into reclaiming my space, literally. I moved furniture around, shifted the energy in every room, and started filling the place with things that actually reflected me. Not the version of me I'd become trying to keep Tyler happy, but the one I was rediscovering piece by piece. I pulled out artwork I'd tucked away because he said it was too busy, hung it proudly in the living room. Replaced his tacky sports memorabilia with photos of my travels, my friends, the people who actually mattered. I even got rid of the awful coffee table he insisted on keeping, the one he claimed had character, but always looked like it belonged in a frat house. Each change felt like taking a brick off my chest. Chloe kept me updated throughout the week. Her voice, always calm and razor-sharp, was a lifeline. "So update," she said during one of our calls. "The buyer won't be pressing charges. They're pissed, obviously, but since they got their deposit back, they're not pursuing anything criminal." "That's a relief," I replied. "But the divorce paperwork is in motion. Once he signs, you're legally free." Free. The word echoed in my mind. It was more than just the end of a marriage. It was the release of everything that had weighed me down, every moment I'd second-guessed myself, every time I'd made myself smaller to keep the peace. Tyler tried reaching out a few more times, of course. A half-hearted, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake." A guilt trip message. "You're really going to ruin me over this?" I didn't answer. I'd spent too much time fixing things he broke. Not anymore. By the end of the week, the apartment felt like a completely new place. The light hit differently in the mornings. The air felt clearer, less stifling. I found myself actually looking forward to coming home again, instead of dreading the tension that used to greet me at the door. One afternoon, while organizing a cabinet, I stumbled across a photo of us, Tyler and me, from what felt like a lifetime ago. We were grinning, arms around each other, standing on the balcony of our old rental before we bought this place, back when everything still felt full of promise. I stared at it for a long moment. There were good memories, sure, but they were buried under too much manipulation, too many lies. That version of him, of us, was gone. I tucked the photo into a drawer, didn't throw it away, but I didn't want to look at it anymore either. It was part of my story, but it no longer defined me. A few weeks later, the divorce was finalized. Chloe called me the second the paperwork was filed. "It's done," she said simply. "He signed. No drama." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me," she replied. "You did all the hard stuff. I just made it official." That night, Lauren and I celebrated at a rooftop bar downtown, the kind of place Tyler always found too expensive or too loud. We clinked glasses again, the skyline glowing behind us. "Divorced and glowing," Lauren teased. "You know, single life really suits you." I laughed. "It's not the single life," I said. "It's the freedom." She nodded like she understood exactly what I meant, because she did. For the first time, I wasn't living under someone else's expectations. I wasn't second-guessing every decision or bending myself into a version of what someone else wanted me to be. I was just me, strong, smart, unapologetically in charge of my own life. Back home, I kept leaning into that feeling. The apartment became a reflection of who I was becoming. I swapped out furniture, painted the bedroom a soft sage green, added bookshelves to display my favorite novels, things Tyler once called clutter. I started inviting people over again, friends I hadn't seen in ages because Tyler always made excuses. We laughed, we filled the space with joy, and not once did I feel like I had to filter myself. But I also knew this place, as much as I'd fought for it, wouldn't be my forever home. It was a chapter, a necessary one, but not the final destination. Eventually, I'd find somewhere new, somewhere untouched by old shadows. Until then, I was going to enjoy every inch of this hard-won space. I curled up on the couch one evening, tea in hand, the city glowing through the window, and thought back to that phone call, Tyler's smug voice, the way he'd laughed like he'd already won, and I couldn't help but smile, because in trying to tear my life apart, he'd accidentally given me the clearest wake-up call of my life. He thought I was weak. He thought I'd fall apart, but I didn't. I stood up. I fought back, and I came out of it stronger, wiser, and more free than I'd ever been. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. This was the beginning of something bigger. My life, my rules, my future. And I wasn't afraid anymore. A month later, my life didn't just look different, it felt different. The apartment had transformed into something that felt like me, not because I did a massive renovation or bought fancy furniture. It was the small changes, the deliberate choices, the way I rearranged the living room to let the light in, the way I filled the kitchen with herbs and candles and music. It was warm, calm, and completely mine. Tyler's absence wasn't just noticeable, it was a relief. There were no more late-night arguments, no more wondering if he'd come home annoyed, or worse, indifferent. No more twisting myself into knots trying to understand why I never felt enough around the man I thought I loved. That quiet, suffocating ache I used to carry? Gone. Instead, there was peace, clarity, a deep-rooted confidence I hadn't felt in years. And Chloe, bless her, continued to be my rock. She tied up every loose legal end with grace and precision. During our final check-in call, she confirmed what I already felt in my bones. "It's official," she said. "Divorce finalized. No contest. He didn't even try to stall." "I think he finally realized there's nothing left to hold on to," I said. "Or maybe he knew he didn't stand a chance." We both laughed, but there was a bitter sweetness to it. Because here's the thing. I didn't walk away from Tyler without scars. I wasn't pretending I'd been some unshakable warrior through it all. There were nights I cried, moments where doubt crept in, and times I wondered if I was making everything worse by refusing to bend. But those moments passed, and every time they did, I reminded myself I deserved better. Not just better than Tyler, but better than the version of myself I had become, trying to keep a sinking relationship afloat. He wasn't just the problem. I was part of it too, by staying quiet, by letting things slide, by convincing myself it was normal for someone you love to treat you like a convenience. But not anymore. One afternoon, while sorting through old drawers, I found a small box of keepsakes from our early days. Movie ticket stubs, postcards, a crumpled birthday card from our second anniversary. I sat on the floor and sifted through them slowly, letting myself feel the nostalgia. There had been good times. There had been love. But love alone isn't enough. Not if it comes with deception, with entitlement, with betrayal. I closed the box, taped it shut, and placed it in the back of my closet. I didn't need to throw it away, but I also didn't need to keep those memories in plain sight. They were part of the story, sure, but they didn't define the ending. To celebrate the final chapter closing, Lauren and I booked a weekend getaway to the coast. Just the two of us. Ocean air, no emails, and zero talk of men. "You're like a whole new person," she said as we sipped cocktails on the beach. "Not that you weren't badass before, but now, it's like you finally see it." I smiled. I think I just stopped waiting for someone else to validate it. Back at home, I started thinking about what came next. The apartment had been a battlefield, a sanctuary, a symbol of victory. And while I still loved it, I knew deep down that eventually I'd move on. I'd find a new place, one that didn't carry echoes of Tyler's footsteps or memories of a life I'd outgrown. But I wasn't rushing. For the first time, I wasn't chasing anything. I was just living, healing, growing. I got back into old hobbies I'd abandoned, started writing again, reconnected with friends I'd drifted from, even joined a local book club where nobody knew me as Tyler's wife or the woman with the messy divorce. They just knew me as Amelia. Just me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting golden light across the apartment, I curled up on the couch with a cup of tea. I thought about how far I'd come, from that shocking phone call in a hotel hallway to standing my ground in a storm of betrayal, from feeling blindsided and powerless to taking control, step by step, from being the wife in someone else's story to being the lead in my own. Tyler had once said smugly, "You'll have to figure out where you're going to live." And I did. Right here, in a place he tried to take away, but I reclaimed. He wanted to reduce me to rubble, but all he did was hand me a blueprint to rebuild stronger. And Nicole? I never saw her again. Not in person, anyway. But I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she'd dumped Tyler shortly after their little scene in the apartment. Apparently, finding out your new boyfriend tried to commit real estate fraud can put a damper on romance. As for Tyler himself, he faded into the background, a muted memory of someone who once took up too much space in my life. I didn't check up on him, Didn't stalk his socials or ask around. He was part of my past, and that's where he would stay. One final detail made me laugh months later, something Chloe mentioned in passing. "You know," she said over lunch one day, "the buyer's agent told me Tyler tried to blame you for the whole thing." I raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" "Yeah, said you misled him about the ownership. Claimed he thought he still had rights to the apartment." I rolled my eyes, not even surprised. Typical. Blame the woman who cleaned up his mess. Chloe grinned. "Didn't work. They told him to get a lawyer. He never did. I guess that was the real ending. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a final, fiery argument, just silence. Him fading into the background, me moving forward. Because closure doesn't always come in the form of an apology. Sometimes it's peace. Sometimes it's a locked door. Sometimes it's just waking up and realizing you're finally free. So I did what I hadn't done in years. I started dreaming again. Of new cities. Of new adventures. Of a life that belonged entirely to me. And maybe one day, love will find its way back into that life. But next time, I won't settle. Next time, I'll recognize the red flags early. Next time, I'll remember what I'm worth. And I'll walk away the second someone tries to make me forget. Because I'm not just a woman who got divorced. I'm not just the girl who got her apartment back. I'm the one who stood her ground, called the bluff, and rewrote the ending. And I'm just getting started.